The flashbulbs popped relentlessly as Giovanni stood on the stage at the Grammy Awards, his heart pounding louder than the applause echoing through the arena. Holding David's hand tightly in front of millions watching live, he knew there was no turning back now. The secret that had defined his entire adult life was out in the open, and surprisingly, the world wasn't crumbling around him. Cheers erupted from every corner, fans waving rainbow flags they had somehow smuggled past security, their voices rising in a wave of genuine joy instead of the outrage he had feared for so long. Giovanni's throat tightened with emotion he could barely contain. 10 years of careful lies, stolen moments, and aching silence had led to this single, electric instant. It hadn't always felt possible. 10 years earlier, in a cramped Los Angeles studio on a humid summer night, Giovanni had been just another struggling 22-year-old with a guitar and a dream. The label had given him one shot to record a demo, and the pressure sat heavy on his shoulders. He was halfway through the third take when the door opened and David walked in carrying a tray of coffee for the sound engineer. Their eyes met across the mixing board, and something shifted in the air, quiet but undeniable. David, with his easy smile and kind hazel eyes, worked freelance as a session photographer. He wasn't supposed to be there that night, but the regular guy had called in sick. By the time the session wrapped at 2 in the morning, they were laughing over cheap tacos on the sidewalk, exchanging numbers like it was the most natural thing in the world. The first date happened 2 nights later at a quiet Thai place in Silver Lake. Giovanni kept glancing at the door, half expecting someone from his tiny circle to walk in and ruin everything before it started. David noticed. "You keep checking like you're waiting for the cops," he teased gently. Giovanni laughed it off, but inside the fear was already taking root. His single had just started climbing the indie charts, and his manager had been crystal clear. Image is everything. Straight, clean, relatable, the man had barked. Giovanni's family back in Ohio still called every Sunday asking when he was bringing a nice girl home. The weight of all those expectations pressed down harder with every bite of curry. Yet David made the fear feel smaller. He listened when Giovanni talked about the songs he wrote at 3 in the morning, the ones that never made it onto the official tracks because they were too honest. David never pushed, never demanded labels. Their nights together were simple at first. Walks along the beach at Malibu when the crowds thinned, late-night drives up the coast with the windows down, sharing playlists that somehow said everything they couldn't voice yet. Giovanni fell hard and fast, the kind of fall that leaves you breathless and terrified all at once. For the first time in his life, he felt seen, not as the next big thing, but as himself. Then came the first big break. His debut single hit the top 40, and suddenly interviewers wanted to know everything. Who he was dating, what his type was, why a good-looking guy like him was still single. Giovanni froze every time. He started inventing stories about a fictional college girlfriend back home. David understood, or at least said he did, but Giovanni caught the flicker of hurt in his eyes when he had to cancel their weekend plans because a magazine photo shoot ran long. "It's just for now," Giovanni promised one night, pulling David close in the dark apartment they now shared on the down low. David nodded against his shoulder, but the silence that followed felt heavier than any words. As the months turned into a year, the hiding became routine. Giovanni bought a second phone just for David. They never posted photos together. When David's sister got married in San Francisco, Giovanni sent flowers with a fake name and watched the ceremony on a live stream from a hotel room in New York. The guilt gnawed at him constantly, yet every time he considered coming clean, the voices in his head grew louder. His conservative parents who still voted against marriage equality, his manager warning that one wrong move could tank the record deal, the fans who screamed for the clean-cut heartthrob they thought they knew. David never complained, but Giovanni could see the toll it took, the way his partner's smiles grew tighter around the edges. One evening after a sold-out show in Chicago, Giovanni slipped away from the after-party and drove 2 hours to meet David at a roadside motel. They lay on the lumpy bed talking until dawn. "I don't want to be the reason you lose everything," David whispered, tracing patterns on Giovanni's chest. Giovanni pulled him closer, voice cracking. "You're the only thing that makes any of this real." In that moment, the promise felt unbreakable. But promises, he was about to learn, are fragile when the whole world is watching. By the time Giovanni's second album dropped, the hiding had become an art form. He smiled through red carpet interviews, posed with female models at events, and laughed off rumors about his mysterious single status. The money rolled in, the tours sold out, and his parents flew out for the Los Angeles premiere of his first music video, beaming with pride. "We always knew you'd make it," his father said, clapping him on the back. Giovanni smiled so hard his face hurt, all while David waited 3 blocks away in a rented car because it was too risky to be seen together. The contrast burned. David tried to stay positive. He took freelance jobs that let him travel with the tour under the guise of official photographer, capturing candids that never included Giovanni's face directly. Late nights in hotel suites became their sanctuary. They cooked simple meals, watched old movies, and talked about a future that always seemed just out of reach. One day, Giovanni kept saying, "When the label is locked in for the next 3 albums, when my parents are ready." David would nod, but the distance between them grew even when they were in the same room. Then came the first real crack. Giovanni's childhood best friend Mike flew out for a show in Miami. Mike had known about David from the beginning and had kept the secret better than anyone. They drank on the balcony overlooking the ocean, and Mike finally asked the question Giovanni dreaded. "How long are you going to make him wait, man? He deserves better than hotel rooms and burner phones." Giovanni snapped back defensively, the fear turning sharp. "You don't understand the pressure." Mike left the next morning without saying goodbye, and the silence that followed felt like another loss. The misunderstanding hit harder a month later. David had been offered a dream job shooting for National Geographic in Patagonia for 6 months. He showed Giovanni the contract over breakfast, eyes bright with possibility. "We could finally breathe," he said. "You could visit on breaks. No one would suspect anything." Giovanni stared at the papers, panic rising. 6 months apart meant 6 months of wondering if David would meet someone who could give him the open life he deserved. "I can't lose you," Giovanni whispered, voice raw. David's face fell. "You already are, Gio. Every time you choose the closet over us." They didn't fight, not exactly, but the quiet that settled between them afterward was worse than any argument. Giovanni threw himself into work to drown the guilt. New songs poured out, angrier, more honest than anything he'd released. The label loved the edge. Fans called it his most mature album yet. But late at night, when the adrenaline faded, he would scroll through David's Instagram, heart clenching at every new photo from the road. David looked happy, freer than he had in years. The fear that David might not come back clawed at him constantly. Then the betrayal came from the last place he expected. Jake, a backup dancer who had become part of the inner circle, cornered Giovanni after rehearsal one afternoon. "I saw you two at the motel in Chicago," he said casually, scrolling through his phone. "Cute pictures. Wouldn't the tabloids love these?" Giovanni's blood ran cold. Jake wanted money, a bigger role, leverage. Giovanni paid him off once, then twice, each time hating himself more. The secret that had felt like protection now felt like chains tightening around his throat. David sensed something was wrong the moment he returned from Patagonia, but Giovanni couldn't bring himself to confess. Not yet. The pressure was building, and he knew something had to give. The tour bus hummed through the desert night toward Phoenix, when Giovanni's phone buzzed with a message from his mother. "We saw the new interview. That model you were with looked lovely. When are you bringing her home?" He stared at the screen until the words blurred. David slept beside him, head on his shoulder, unaware of the fresh wave of guilt crashing over Giovanni. He deleted the message and pulled David closer, breathing in the familiar scent of his shampoo like it was oxygen. But the lie sat heavy in his chest. 2 weeks later, the misunderstanding exploded. David had planned a quiet anniversary dinner at their favorite hidden Italian place in the hills. Giovanni arrived late, distracted by a last-minute label meeting where executives had floated the idea of a fake engagement to a rising actress for publicity. "It's just optics," they said. When he finally reached the restaurant, David's face was pale. "I saw the photos online, Gio. You and her at the gala. You looked comfortable." Giovanni tried to explain, but the words tangled. David stood up slowly. "I can't keep being your secret. I love you, but I'm tired of disappearing." He left before Giovanni could stop him. The next 48 hours were hell. Giovanni canceled 2 appearances, locked himself in the apartment, and replayed every moment they had shared. He remembered the night David had held him through a panic attack after his father's heart scare, the way David had quietly paid the rent when Giovanni's advances ran dry early on. Sacrifice wasn't just a word anymore. It was the thought of letting David go so he could have a normal life. Giovanni drafted a text telling David to move on, but his thumb hovered over send for hours before he deleted it. He couldn't do it. Not yet. His loyal friend Mike flew in unannounced, using the spare key Giovanni had given him years ago. They sat on the balcony with beers, and for once Giovanni didn't hold back. He told Mike everything. The blackmail from Jake, the fake relationship pressure, the way David's eyes had looked when he walked out. Mike listened without judgment. "You're going to lose him for real if you don't choose, man. And I'm not just talking about David. You're losing yourself too." The words landed like stones in still water. That night, Giovanni drove to David's temporary sublet and stood outside the door for 20 minutes before knocking. When David opened it, neither spoke. They simply held each other in the doorway, the kind of embrace that said everything apologies couldn't. But the reprieve was short. Jake sent a cryptic email the next morning with an attached photo from their motel night. "Double the last amount, or this goes public by Friday." Giovanni stared at the screen, hands shaking. The turning point was rushing toward him faster than he was ready for. He wired the money again, but this time he knew it was only buying time. David noticed the withdrawal on their shared account and asked gently what was wrong. Giovanni lied one more time, hating the taste of it. The psychological weight pressed down until he could barely breathe. Every decision now carried the scent of consequence, and he was running out of places to hide. The secret finally cracked open on a rainy Tuesday in October. Giovanni was in the middle of a radio interview when his publicist burst into the studio waving her phone. A tabloid site had posted blurred photos of him and David leaving a restaurant together 6 months earlier. The headline screamed, "Mystery Man in Superstar's Life?" Comments flooded in instantly, some supportive, many vicious. Giovanni's heart stopped. He finished the interview on autopilot, then drove straight to David's studio, ignoring the ringing phone in his pocket. David was already waiting, eyes red from crying. "Jake sold the rest of the photos," he said quietly. The full story spilled out then. The blackmail, the payments, the fear that had kept Giovanni silent for so long. David listened without interrupting, but when Giovanni finished, the silence stretched painfully. "I thought we were past the hiding," David whispered. "I thought I was enough." Giovanni reached for him, but David stepped back. "I need time, Gio. I can't watch you destroy yourself anymore." He left the studio without another word, and the door closing felt like the end of everything. That night, Giovanni sat alone in their apartment, surrounded by memories. The guitar David had bought him for their first anniversary. The framed photo from their secret trip to Big Sur, faces half hidden by sunglasses. He scrolled through old messages until his eyes burned. The betrayal from Jake had forced his hand, but the real betrayal, he realized, had been his own hesitation. He called Mike at 3 a.m. "I'm done hiding," he said, voice breaking. Mike's reply was simple. "Then fight for him." Out loud this time. The next morning, Giovanni drove to his parents' hotel. They had flown in for a charity event he was headlining. His mother hugged him tightly, then pulled back when she saw his face. "What's wrong, baby?" The words poured out in a rush. David, the 10 years, the love that had kept him going through every spotlight moment. His father's face hardened. "We didn't raise you like this." His mother started crying. Giovanni stood there, heart shattering, but for the first time he didn't apologize for who he was. "I love him," he said simply, "and I'm going to marry him if he'll still have me." The silence that followed was deafening, but he walked out feeling lighter than he had in years. David wasn't answering calls. Giovanni spent the next week canceling appearances, writing a new song in the dead of night that poured every unsaid word onto paper. The label panicked. His manager threatened to drop him. Giovanni didn't care. The psychological storm inside him had finally broken, leaving clarity in its wake. He knew what he had to do. He booked a private jet to Patagonia where David had returned for another assignment, heart-hammering the entire flight. This time there would be no more secrets, no more half-truths. Only the truth, raw and terrifying and necessary. David stood on a rocky outcrop in Torres del Paine, camera in hand, when Giovanni stepped out of the rented SUV. The wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of rain and earth. David lowered the camera slowly, disbelief written across his face. Giovanni walked forward until only feet separated them. "I told my parents," he said, voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. "I told the label I'm done playing their game. And I'm telling the world tomorrow night at the awards if you'll stand beside me." David's eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to do this for me." Giovanni shook his head. "I'm doing it for us. For the man I want to be when I look in the mirror." They stood there in the Patagonian wind, and when David finally stepped into his arms, the years of silence melted away like snow under sunlight. The flight back to Los Angeles felt like a second beginning. They held hands openly the entire way, no more burner phones, no more glances over shoulders. Giovanni drafted the statement on his laptop while David slept against his shoulder. The words came easier than he expected. "For 10 years I hid the greatest part of my life. Today I'm choosing truth. David isn't my secret anymore. He's my future." He read it aloud when David woke up, and the smile that spread across his partner's face was worth every consequence that might follow. The night of the awards arrived with a different kind of electricity. Giovanni's team had tried to talk him out of it, but he walked the red carpet with David's hand in his anyway. Cameras flashed. Questions flew. He answered every one with quiet honesty. Inside the theater, when his category was announced, he stood at the podium holding the trophy and looked straight into the camera. "This award is for every kid who feels they have to hide. You don't. Love is worth it." The standing ovation that followed nearly brought him to his knees. Backstage, David waited with open arms. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. But the real test came the next morning. His parents called. His mother's voice was soft. "We watched the speech. It wasn't easy to hear, but we love you. Both of you." His father stayed silent longer, then cleared his throat. "Bring him home for Thanksgiving." Tears streamed down Giovanni's face as he hung up. The road to acceptance wasn't straight or smooth, but it was moving forward. Friends reached out, some shocked, some supportive. Mike threw an impromptu party at his apartment, rainbow balloons everywhere. Even a few label executives admitted the move had generated more positive press than any PR stunt could have. David proposed 3 weeks later on the same beach where they had shared their first real date. No cameras, no crowd, just the two of them and the ocean. Giovanni said yes before David finished the question. Planning the wedding became a quiet rebellion against every year they had lost. They chose a small venue in Malibu with ocean views, close friends, and family who were still learning. Giovanni wrote a new song for the first dance, pouring every emotion into the lyrics. The night before the ceremony, they sat on the balcony of their new house, the one they had bought together in the hills, and talked about the future without fear for the first time. The wedding day dawned bright and clear. Giovanni stood at the altar in a simple navy suit, heart steady as David walked toward him down the sandy aisle lined with white flowers. Their hands met, and the world narrowed to just the two of them. Vows were spoken without scripts, honest promises forged in fire. "I will never hide you again," Giovanni said, voice thick. "You are my home." David's reply was softer, but just as fierce. "And I will stand beside you through every spotlight and every shadow." Rings slipped onto fingers, and when they kissed, the small gathering erupted in cheers that carried across the waves. News of the marriage spread within hours. Fans flooded social media with messages of love and support. Rainbow flags waved at every concert stop for months afterward. Giovanni released the song he had written for David as a surprise single, and it shot straight to #1. The lyrics told their story without shame. 10 years of silence, the courage it took to break it, and the joy waiting on the other side. Interviews followed, but now Giovanni answered every question with David beside him, their fingers intertwined on camera. Life didn't become perfect overnight. There were still awkward family dinners, the occasional hateful comment online, moments when old fears tried to resurface. But each time, they faced them together. Giovanni watched David bloom in his career, taking on projects that celebrated queer artists. David watched Giovanni grow into the artist he had always wanted to be, honest, free, unafraid. Their love, once hidden in shadows, now stood in full light, stronger for every scar it carried. Looking back from the stage at yet another sold-out show, Giovanni scanned the crowd and found David in his usual spot near the front, smiling up at him. The journey had been long and painful, but every step had led here, to acceptance, to partnership, to a life built on truth. He raised the microphone and dedicated the final song to the man who had taught him that love was worth every risk. True or false? Hiding who you love always protects you in the end?